Chosen one. The certainty that settled into your bones was never delusion, it was revelation. That quiet, cold knowing that something unseen was pressing against your life. Slowing what should have flowed, tangling what should have opened was not paranoia. It was discernment, awakening in you like a guardian rising from sleep. And now the current has shifted. What moved against you is recoiling. What was sent with intention is returning with consequence. The very force that was aimed at your undoing is circling back to its source with an accuracy so precise, feels like divine geometry correcting itself. You felt it in the season when everything stalled, when you were disciplined, aligned, committed to your daily inner work. You were not performing spirituality for applause. You were not chanting for show or speaking light while hiding shadow. You were doing the real work. You were guarding your thoughts. You were cleansing your habits. You were choosing integrity when no one was watching. And still doors refused to open. Money hesitated at the threshold. Invitations dissolved before they reached your hands. People who once responded with warmth grew silent without explanation. You questioned yourself in the dark. You asked whether you were misaligned, whether you had missed some unseen lesson. You humbled yourself before the altar of self-examination, but the disruptions did not resemble the patterns of your own wounds. They were surgical, perfectly timed interruptions. Specific sabotage that struck only what mattered most. It was as if someone had studied the blueprint of your dreams and decided to pull at the precise threads that held your future together. Chosen. One, your spirit recognized the difference. Karma teaches through reflection. Inner wounds echo as repeated mistakes. But what you experienced was interference with intent. It was invested. It was focused. It was someone's will crossing into your field without permission. Someone who knew your pathways. Someone who understood what doors you were approaching and decided to press their hand against the hinges. This was not casual dislike. This was obsession. There is a difference between disapproval and fixation. Disapproval passes like a cloud. Obsession lingers, calculates measures. They measured themselves against you, against your magnetism, against your insight, against the way rooms subtly shifted when you entered. They felt the comparison cut into their pride like a blade, and instead of turning inward to heal their insecurity, they projected it outward and named you the threat. You sensed their gaze even when their mouth smiled. You felt the undercurrent beneath their compliments. Your body tightened in their presence without visible reason. You dismissed it at first. You told yourself not to assume. But your nervous system does not lie. The chosen one carries an ancient instrument within the flesh, a barometer that reads the pressure of unseen storms. This person was not distant. They were near, perhaps an ex whose intimacy once granted them access to your vulnerabilities. Perhaps family bound by blood yet separated by spirit. A sibling, a cousin, a romantic tie entangled with kinship. Someone who knew the texture of your fears and the architecture of your ambitions. Someone who understood what mattered to you enough to aim at it. They did not simply wish ill in passing thought. They invested energy, time, focus, concentration. Whether through ritual or relentless fixation, they directed intention toward your pathways. They targeted your opportunities, your relationships, your momentum. They aimed not randomly, but precisely like a hand adjusting the trajectory of an arrow mid-flight. But here is what they failed to calculate, chosen one. They underestimated the field that surrounds you. They mistook your humility for vulnerability. They mistook your silence for absence of protection. They believed their previous victories against weaker targets qualified them to scale that same force toward you. They did not account for the generational guardianship that has walked beside you since before your name was spoken into the world. Before your first breath, there were forces assigned to your lineage. Before your first heartbreak, there were watchers stationed at the perimeter of your becoming. You are not defended by ego or by human strategy alone. You are backed by ancestral memory, by prayers whispered by mouths you never met, by covenants formed long before your birth. Your field is layered. Your protection is interwoven. Your roots run deeper than their reach. And so what they sent did not dissolve you. It delayed you. What they attempted to redirect did not disappear. It paused, waiting for divine timing to correct the imbalance. Everything that seemed denied was only postponed, held in suspension while the scales adjusted. Now, the recoil has begun. Energy does not vanish. It completes circuits. Intention travels until it finds its rightful resting place. What they concentrated with malice cannot remain suspended forever. It must return to its origin, carrying with it the weight of its own design. You may notice subtle tremors in their world, a restlessness, a fraying of the structures they relied upon. The same precision they aimed at your life is now mapping their own collapse. Not because you wished it, not because you retaliated, but because the universe maintains equilibrium with ruthless fairness. Chosen One, understand this deeply. You were never paranoid. Your awareness was accurate. Your body read the distortion in the field. Your spirit identified the foreign current. The stagnation you endured was not proof of failure. It was evidence of interference, and the fact that you survived it without hardening into bitterness is testimony to the depth of your strength. Pause here. Breathe into that truth. Your presence here is not accidental. It is a sign of immense merit and high vibration. Souls who are unaware do not stumble upon confirmations like this. The fact that you are receiving this transmission means your frequency is already elevated enough to recognize it. You are not small. You are not fragile. You are calibrated. If this resonates in your chest, if your body has already whispered the name of the one who stood against you, anchor this shift. Comment 777 or I am ready. Seal your awareness in action. Declare your alignment with the reversal that has already begun. Chosen One, what comes next is not vengeance. It is restoration. The pathways that were obstructed are reassembling. The doors that resisted are recalibrating. The money that stalled is seeking its route back to you. The connections that fell silent will either reappear in truth or be replaced with something cleaner. You are witnessing the end of interference and the beginning of momentum. Let your heart remain steady. Do not lower yourself into the density of their unraveling. You are not called to watch them fall. You are called to rise as your field clears. The spell that was aimed at you has turned backward, and you stand untouched not because you are lucky, but because you are chosen. Chosen One. Your relationships were never randomly shaken. They were studied. They were mapped. The second strike against you was not your finances or your opportunities, but your circle. The aligned souls who were meant to walk beside you encountered a distortion field placed carefully between you and them. No dramatic betrayal, no obvious lie, just engineered misunderstanding. Warmth turned cool without explanation. Conversations that once flowed began to stall. Messages went unanswered. Invitations faded into silence. You searched your memory for something you might have said wrong. You replayed moments in your mind, scanning for error. But the fracture did not originate in your words. It was introduced between them. Subtle manipulation rarely appears as overt falsehood. It appears as timing, as suggestion, as the slight twist of a narrative just enough to create doubt. Information was bent, not broken. Seeds of uncertainty were planted, not accusations. The result was distance without confrontation. Support that was meant to nourish you quietly withdrew. You felt it and could not name it. Now you can. The third target was more dangerous than opportunity or connection. It was your self-concept, the architecture of your inner clarity. They understood something crucial about you, Chosen One. If they could not overpower your external world, they would attempt to erode your internal compass. If you began to question yourself, they would not need to interfere further. You would slow yourself, and so doubt appeared in areas where you were once firm. Confidence dissolved without cause. Decisions that once felt intuitive became clouded. You began to wonder if you were the weak link, if perhaps your discernment had been exaggerated, if maybe you were misreading everything. Here is the truth about directed malice. When intention is concentrated over time, it builds momentum. Each moment of obsession strengthens the thread. Each repeated visualization compounds force. They refreshed it daily, thought about you daily, measured you daily. The energy grew through repetition, but energy obeys law. When it reverses, it does not return empty. It returns amplified by the very obsession that fueled it. What they sent multiplied itself through fixation. And now, that same multiplication works in reverse. You saw signs. You did. But you dismissed them because reasonable hearts do not want to believe that someone once close would move against them. You told yourself you were imagining it. You explained away the last-minute collapses, the sudden reversals, the relationships that cooled without logic, the doors that shut just as they began to open. You called it coincidence because calling it interference would have required you to confront something painful. The material world is downstream from the unseen. Effects appear long after causes are planted. Before the collapse in your outer life, there were tremors in your inner field, sleep disturbances, waking at specific hours, vivid dreams that felt coded, the sensation of being observed when no one was there, a heaviness that entered rooms before you did. Your body knew. The most insidious symptom was the quiet corrosion of self-trust. It felt internal. It felt like insecurity. But it was engineered pressure against your clarity. A fog laid over what had once been sharp, and because you are honest with yourself, you assume the fog was your own creation. Chosen one. Your clarity is not gone. It was drowned temporarily beneath interference. And as the sender begins to unravel under the weight of their own return current, your certainty resurfaces. Notice it. It is quieter than ego. It does not shout. It steadies. It feels grounded, unmistakable calm. You are not recovering something new. You are reclaiming what was always yours. There is another layer to this unfolding. The suppression you experienced was not isolated. Many chosen ones are encountering resistance simultaneously. Voices muted, platforms restricted. Visibility reduced at the exact moment momentum should have expanded. It is not coincidence. When consciousness rises, systems react. When clarity spreads, forces that rely on confusion attempt containment. But suppression cannot hold indefinitely. There is a recalibration happening beneath the surface. As old structures attempt to silence higher frequencies, new pathways emerge. Some call it awakening. Some call it ascension. It is less mystical than it sounds and more practical than it appears. It is the refinement of awareness, the upgrading of perception, the sharpening of discernment. You may hear language about new technologies. Destiny Engine's 5D tools, subconscious reprogramming. The promise will be framed as empowerment, as enhancement, as a shortcut to reclaim what was stalled. Chosen one, pause here. Power does not require spectacle. Consciousness does not need machinery to bend reality. Synchronicities do not stack because of an external device. They stack because of alignment, because of integrity between your inner state and outer action. Your awakening is not a product to be purchased. It is a discipline to be practiced. The true engine of destiny is your attention. The subconscious does not need to be overwritten by artificial ritual. It responds to repetition of truth, to embodied behavior, to consistency in thought and action. Be discerning. Not everything framed as ascension is alignment. Not every offer of enhancement carries purity. Some systems capitalize on the hunger of those who feel suppressed. They promise acceleration in exchange for dependency. But you are not meant to outsource your sovereignty. The reversal already happening around you is not triggered by a tool, it is triggered by law, by equilibrium correcting imbalance, by protection activating without your permission required. Chosen. 1. Your high vibration is not proven by chasing the next elevated concept. It is proven by your steadiness, by your refusal to collapse when misaligned energy pressed against you, by your integrity when doubt tried to enter your bloodstream. Your presence here is not accidental. It is confirmation of merit. Souls operating at low awareness do not question the unseen. They do not recognize interference. They do not seek clarity. The fact that you are here absorbing this means your frequency has already stabilized above confusion. Anchor this. Comment 777 or I am ready. Seal your return to clarity. Claim your restored field. You will notice shifts. Conversations that once felt distorted will either resolve or dissolve. Opportunities that seemed lost will resurface in improved form. Your sleep will deepen. The feeling of being watched will fade into neutrality. Self-doubt will lose its grip because it was never native to you. Guard your focus. As your field clears, new invitations will appear, some aligned, some disguised. Test them not by excitement, but by resonance. Does your body soften or tense? Does your mind sharpen or scatter? Your discernment is recalibrated now. Trust it. You were never the weak link. You were the anchor, and anchors are tested by storms, not defined by them. The interference phase is ending. The restoration phase has begun. Walk forward not in fear of hidden hands, but in confidence of visible correction. The return current is precise, and you stand at its center, untouched, learning rising. Chosen one, this is the heart of it. Malicious energy does not evaporate when it fails to penetrate its intended target. It ricochets. It searches for entry, and when none is found, it returns to the frequency that emitted it. What protected you was never a rigid wall. It was not a fortress of fear or defensive isolation. It was a living field, responsive, intelligent, ancient, a spiritual ecosystem that reads incoming currents and decides their destination. You never needed to retaliate. You never needed to scheme or defend yourself through counterattack. While you were choosing restraint, something far older than your conscious mind was already acting. Your field was calibrated long before this lifetime. It reads intention like wind across water. When hostility approaches, it does not absorb, it reflects. Understand this deeply. Protection is not always about blocking. Sometimes it is about redirection. Every act of integrity strengthened that field. Every time you felt the surge of anger rise in your chest and chose not to weaponize it, you added density to your shield. Every moment you could have exposed, humiliated, or retaliated, and instead remained silent, you refined your perimeter. Every decision to bless when bitterness would have been easier amplified your frequency. Hostile energy cannot anchor in a field that refuses to match its vibration. The more potent your field became, the more decisively hostile currents were returned. Not with vengeance, with precision. What was sent found no attachment point, and so it circled back along the same thread it traveled. Your attacker did not strike you alone. They struck your inheritance, your ancestral line, the spiritual agreements surrounding your bloodline. They aimed at someone whose protection was layered across generations. They thought they were targeting a single life. They collided with lineage. Lineage cannot be dismantled by obsession. It cannot be punctured by ego. It cannot be overthrown by concentrated envy. They fed their working for too long. Each repetition required energy. Each fixation required attention. Each ritual required force drawn from their own reserves. They invested energy they did not possess in surplus. They believed intensity equaled power. They did not understand sustainability. Now, depletion sets in. When reversed dark energy begins to settle back into its source, it does not announce itself loudly. It starts subtly. Their relationships wobble. Trust fractures in places they once felt secure. Their spiritual tools fail them. Methods that once seemed effective lose potency. Rituals produce static instead of results. Confidence begins to erode from the inside. What once felt like power now feels like exposure. The ego that once strutted with certainty begins to tremble. When ego defenses drop, dread surfaces, not dramatic terror, quiet gnawing recognition, an awareness that they crossed a boundary, not merely social, but spiritual. Spiritual law does not bend to ego. It responds to alignment. They violated a current they did not fully comprehend. They attempted to dismantle someone chosen and protected. They mistook proximity for permission. Chosen one, your role now is nothing. Do not intervene. Do not observe with satisfaction. Do not lower your frequency to monitor their unraveling. Divine order is already in motion. Correction is not your task. Justice is not your responsibility. Look forward. The temptation to watch is subtle. Curiosity whispers. But your evolution requires detachment. The same discipline that kept you clean under pressure must now keep you clear during reversal. You are not here to witness collapse. You are here to expand. There is something else you must acknowledge. Surviving targeted spiritual interference changes you. It does not leave you as you were. It reaches into the cellular memory of your body. It recalibrates your nervous system. It rewrites how you interpret energy. This was not a gentle initiation. You learned discernment not from books, not from teachers, but from impact. You learned the texture of manipulation by feeling it in your bones. You learned the difference between aligned presence and performance through lived experience. Now, you feel it instantly. Aligned people soften your body. Performers create micro-tension. Real opportunities feel expansive, even when intimidating. Traps feel urgent, heavy, or overly polished. Clean energy moves calmly. Manipulated fields create static, even when wrapped in attractive language. This precision was forged in your hardest season. The interference sharpened you. There is a myth that growth must be comfortable to be spiritual. It is not true. Sometimes growth arrives through friction, through pressure, through the necessity of strengthening your energetic immune system. You are not paranoid now. You are precise. You can sense when someone is speaking from authenticity versus projection. You can feel when an invitation is aligned versus opportunistic. You can detect subtle distortions in tone, timing, intention. This is not hypervigilance. It is attunement. Your field does not panic anymore. It reads, it scans, it adjusts. The storm that once confused you has trained you. What once felt like chaos now feels like information. You no longer react impulsively to every shift in energy. You observe, you calibrate, you respond intentionally. Chosen one. Your presence here is proof of your merit. Only a high vibration soul survives targeted interference without becoming corrupted by it. Many would have hardened. Many would have retaliated. Many would have descended into bitterness and matched the density sent toward them. You did not. You refined. Anchor this awareness. Comment 777 or I am ready. Seal the acknowledgement that you are no longer the same version of yourself who entered that storm. The interference did not diminish you. It distilled you. Now, your protection is not theoretical. It is embodied. Your field is not passive. It is responsive. Your discernment is not abstract. It is cellular. You walk differently now, not arrogantly, not fearfully, steadily. Hostile energy recognizes your perimeter before it attempts entry. And if it does attempt entry, it meets a calibrated system that redirects without drama. You never needed to fight because your field was already fighting intelligently. Look ahead. Your refinement was expensive. It cost you comfort. It cost you relationships. It cost you certainty. But what you gained cannot be purchased or simulated. You gained clarity that does not depend on external validation. You gained protection that does not require aggression. You gained sight that does not rely on suspicion. This is the new ground beneath your feet. Walk it with calm authority. The ricochet has completed its arc. Your field stands intact, stronger, more precise. And you move forward untouched, not because nothing was sent, but because nothing could stay. Chosen one, you have developed capacities. Most souls never awaken because they were never tested in this way. What was done against you became involuntary spiritual training. The very force intended to weaken you became resistance that strengthened you. The attacker believed they were eroding your foundation. In truth, they were pressure testing it. And what survives pressure does not merely endure, it evolves. Before this season, you possessed confidence. You believed in your abilities. You trusted your path when evidence supported you. But confidence depends on visible results. It thrives when momentum is obvious. What you carry now is different. It is conviction. Conviction does not require applause. It does not collapse when evidence disappears. It does not beg for reassurance. You built when there were no signs of progress. You kept moving when doors refused to open. You chose yourself when no one else affirmed your worth. You trusted your direction when proof was withheld. That is structural power, permanent power, the kind that cannot be dismantled by external silence. Hard seasons reveal the true self. When comfort is removed, performance fades. What remains is essence. Your reflection in that season showed someone who chose integrity under pressure. Someone who could have retaliated and did not. Someone who could have quit and kept walking instead. Someone who held love in their hands when resentment would have felt justified. This is who you are beneath circumstance. You felt alone. There were nights when the weight pressed so heavily on your chest that words felt useless. How could you explain interference that left no fingerprints? How could you articulate spiritual sabotage to those who measure reality only by what can be touched? You carried your burden in private hours. You processed quietly. You endured without witnesses, but you were never alone. Divine protection is not conditional. It does not activate only when you are strong. It surrounds you before you understand its presence. Your backing existed before your first breath. It was embedded into your purpose. The field that responded on your behalf was not improvised. It was inherited. Your ancestors saw everything. Not metaphorically, energetically. Lineage is not a poetic concept. It is a living current. They observed the movements against you. They intervened in ways you will never fully see. Threats you were never aware of were neutralized before they reached you. Paths you assumed were closed were rerouted for timing rather than denial. Protection became most active when your strength felt weakest. There were moments when you thought you were hanging by a thread. In truth, multiple hands were holding that thread steady. What felt like isolation was refinement. What felt like abandonment was concealment for preparation. The next season of your life has been waiting, not delayed, held, reserved for the version of you that only fire could produce. Fire does not destroy gold. It separates it from what is not gold. You emerge not merely intact, but clarified. Yet there is one wound that can slow what is now unfolding. It cannot stop your blessings. Nothing can undo what has already been secured, but it can delay the ease with which you receive them. It is not unworthiness. That is not your wound. You have never doubted your value at the core. Your wound is distrust around good things. Years of weaponized love conditioned your nervous system. Affection that turned into leverage. Praise that concealed competition. Support that carried hidden strings. You learned that closeness could shift suddenly. That warmth could conceal agenda. That blessings might contain invisible cost. The person who harmed you reinforced this wound deliberately. They understood that if they could not break you directly, they could plant suspicion toward anything positive that approached you. They wanted you scanning for danger, even in clean spaces. Now, the reflex remains. A door opens and your first instinct is to search for the trap. A kind gesture appears and you analyze the motive. An aligned opportunity emerges and you question its timing. Your body braces as though goodness must be earned or defended. Chosen one. Your protection work is complete. The field is calibrated. The interference has reversed. The correction has executed itself. You do not need to remain in defensive posture. Your next lesson is receiving without dismantling. Let good things be good. Trust without interrogating every blessing. Allow ease without assuming hidden cost. When something arrives that feels aligned, pause. Breathe. Instead of scanning for threats, scan for resonance. Does your body soften? Does your breath deepen? Does your mind quiet rather than race? That is clean energy. Not every open door hides a blade. You are not naive for accepting goodness. You are not careless for stepping into aligned spaces. Discernment does not require suspicion. It requires awareness. And your awareness is sharpened enough now that you can detect manipulation without living in fear of it. There is a difference between caution and contraction. Contraction shrinks you. Caution observes without closing. You survived because you kept your heart open under pressure. Do not close it now that pressure has passed. The same integrity that protected you will guide you through blessing. You are not meant to live in permanent defense. You are meant to expand. Your ancestors did not guard you so you could remain small. They guarded you so you could rise without distortion. They cleared unseen threats so you could step into visibility without contamination. The refined version of you is ready for expansion. Confidence says, I believe I can do this. Conviction says, I know who I am, regardless of outcome. You operate from conviction now. You do not need proof before you move. You do not need reassurance before you trust yourself. You have evidence that you can endure misalignment and remain intact. Anchor this transformation. Comment 777 or I am ready. Seal the transition from defense to reception. Chosen one, you are not the person who entered that season. You are stronger without hardness, softer without vulnerability to manipulation, clearer without paranoia. Blessings approaching you are not tests, they are confirmations. Receive them. Let aligned relationships unfold without assuming betrayal. Let financial flows stabilize without anticipating collapse. Let opportunities expand without preemptively retreating. Your field is intelligent. It will alert you if something is misaligned. You do not need to anticipate danger to stay safe. Now, your work is simple. Open, not recklessly, not blindly, consciously. Allow goodness to land. Allow stability to root. Allow joy to feel unfamiliar without rejecting it. The fire forged you. The protection held you. The reversal cleared the field. This next chapter is not about surviving attack. It is about thriving without fear. And you are ready. Chosen one. There was a threshold in your life, not a vague possibility, a specific advancement point, a doorway calibrated to activate your next expansion. It was not merely about external success. It was about elevation of capacity. Your relationship with money was meant to mature. Your sense of purpose was meant to crystallize. Your inner authority was meant to solidify into something immovable. You felt it approaching once. There was a moment when momentum was building, when alignment seemed imminent, when something inside you whispered that crossing this line would change everything. And then inexplicably, congestion, delays, disruptions at the exact moment breakthrough should have occurred. This was not random. That threshold represented the collapse of comparison for the one who targeted you. As long as you remained contained, they could measure themselves against you and maintain the illusion of superiority. If you crossed into full expansion, the comparison would disintegrate. The internal narrative they relied on would fail, so they aimed at the threshold itself. They did not attempt to erase your destiny. They attempted to stall the moment of activation. They focused their interference at the precise intersection where your next level would ignite. They knew if you stepped through, your growth would accelerate beyond their reach. But destiny cannot be stolen. What belongs to you does not stabilize in someone else's hands. Your advancement was never transferable. It was not a resource to be intercepted. It was coded to your lineage, your timing, your frequency. Your path was not cancelled. It was congested. There is a difference. Cancellation removes. Congestion delays flow. And now the source of interference is consumed with their own unraveling. The energy they invested outward has returned inward. Their attention is fragmented. Their stability is compromised. The pressure they attempted to apply to you now occupies their own system. The road ahead is clearing. You will notice movement first in subtle ways. Financial channels that once felt stagnant begin to shift, not in dramatic spectacle, but in steady alignment. Opportunities that once seemed inaccessible approach from unexpected directions. Conversations open that lead to visibility. Skills you cultivated in silence are about to surface. You worked without applause. You refined abilities without external validation. You invested in growth, even when results were invisible. Those seeds did not disappear. They were gathering momentum beneath the surface. Everything delayed compounds. Time does not diminish planted effort. It intensifies it when alignment returns. What was meant to arrive gradually may now arrive in concentrated waves because the obstruction has lifted. The doors opening for you now are not replicas of the old ones. The old doors led to extraction. People who wanted your light, but not your expansion. Your labor, but not your leadership. Your energy, but not your evolution. You were valued for what you could provide, not for what you could build. The new doors are different. They lead to collaboration, to mutual construction, to partnerships where growth is shared rather than siphoned. You will recognize the difference immediately. The exchange will feel balanced. The respect will be visible. The foundation will not require you to diminish yourself to maintain harmony. This is not luck. It is correction. There is another thread converging here. The significant person once deeply close to you. The one whose proximity was entangled with the earlier interference. Something has shifted in their life. A loss, a reversal, a collapse of something they assumed was stable. When structures built on ego fracture, clarity enters. The loss stripped their defenses. Without distraction, without inflated self-image to hide behind, they were forced into confrontation with truth. And truth revealed something they could not deny. What they had with you was rare. Comparison works both ways. They measured themselves against you before. Now they measure everything after you against what they lost, and nothing matches. No connection carries the same resonance. No dynamic carries the same depth. No alignment carries the same purity. But understand this clearly. Their potential return is not triumph. It is consequence. They built new connections on crooked foundations. Relationships formed in opposition rather than authenticity. Alliances constructed as reaction rather than intention. What is built in opposition to truth eventually destabilizes. Energy rooted in envy cannot sustain itself. The instability they now feel is not romantic nostalgia. It is structural collapse. The return current that cleared your path also exposed the fragility of what they attempted to construct without you. Their movement back toward you is not a victory lap. It is the gravitational pull of unresolved consequence. Chosen one, do not confuse return with restoration. Sometimes people return because the alternative failed. Sometimes they seek familiarity when new structures collapse. Sometimes they recognize value only after losing access. Your discernment is sharper now. You will feel whether their approach carries accountability or desperation, whether their energy is grounded or reactive, whether they have confronted their own shadow or merely fled its impact. You are no longer the version of yourself that can be re-entered casually. The threshold that was once blocked is activating. Your expansion does not require their presence. Your financial growth does not depend on their validation. Your inner authority does not need their recognition. If they return, it will not be to reclaim what they abandoned. It will be to face the consequences of having underestimated it. Anchor this clarity. Comment 777, or I am ready. The congestion has cleared. The threshold stands open again. The activation point you once approached is reappearing, this time without interference. Walk toward it without hesitation. Your advancement was delayed, not denied. Your destiny was protected, not stolen, and what approaches now is not repetition. It is elevation, chosen one. The obsession that once circled you like a shadow did not dissolve when its hostility failed. It created a tether, an invisible cord woven not from love, but from fixation, because whenever someone concentrates energy toward you, whether through admiration or malice, they bind themselves to your field in ways they do not fully comprehend. And even while they believed they were pushing you away, even while they directed thought, emotion, and intention against your growth, they remained spiritually attached to the very presence they resented, feeding a connection that could not sever, because fixation is a form of devotion twisted into distortion. And now that the current has reversed and the interference has returned to its source, the underlying truth beneath their anger and envy stands exposed, pointing back to you, not as prey, but as origin, as axis, as the unmovable center they could not destabilize. And this is the moment when your new clarity becomes not optional, but essential, because you are no longer the version of yourself who reacted from confusion or loneliness. You are the one forged in isolation, tempered by pressure, refined by silence. And your peace is no longer negotiable currency in emotional exchanges. You understand now that growth is not proven by promises or eloquent apologies, but by consistent embodied transformation over time. Because words are easy offerings when consequences loom. Yet sustained change requires dismantling ego, confronting shadow, and rebuilding integrity at the root. And you have learned through lived experience that remorse expressed in urgency is not the same as accountability demonstrated in patience. So if they approach you now, drawn by the unraveling of what they built without you, you will not respond from the wounded parts that once sought closure. You will respond from the sovereign self who has tasted both betrayal and transcendence, and emerged with discernment sharpened beyond persuasion. And you will not trade your hard-earned equilibrium for nostalgia or pity, because your peace was paid for in nights of silent endurance and mornings of disciplined resilience. And yet you must guard against a subtler trap, the temptation to let old wounds calcify into permanent barricades against anything that resembles blessing, because the same interference that once targeted your expansion attempted to corrupt your trust in goodness itself, teaching your nervous system to brace whenever something beautiful approached, conditioning you to suspect hidden cost beneath every gift. But you are not meant to live scanning the horizon for sabotage. You are meant to live anchored in awareness without shrinking into suspicion, and your intuition refined by fire. Not paranoia will guide you when the moment arrives. The same inner voice that diagnosed unseen interference will discern whether a returning presence carries humility or desperation, whether it arrives aligned or still tangled in ego, and you will feel it in your body before you hear it in their words, because your field now reads intention, like light reads shadow, and you will know without needing consensus from outsiders, for your clarity does not depend on commentary, but on resonance. And the story does not end with their potential return, but circles back to the flame within you, because a flame does not die when someone blows at it. It shifts, it bends, it draws inward, and then re-emerges brighter, fed by the very oxygen meant to extinguish it. And your flame survived the interference, not by fighting the wind, but by rooting deeper into its own source, burning quietly through discipline when applause was absent, glowing steadily through integrity when retaliation beckoned, illuminating love when resentment could have been justified. And now that flame moves toward you, manifesting not as spectacle, but as steady transformation through financial openings that align without force, through collaborators who build beside you rather than siphon from you, through opportunities that respect your boundaries rather than exploit your generosity, through clarity that replaces confusion without drama, and even through the inevitable reckoning that unfolds for those who attempted to diminish you, not because you sought revenge, but because balance is woven into the fabric of reality. And as you step forward, you will notice how differently you occupy space, how your presence carries quiet authority, born of surviving what few understand, how your voice no longer seeks validation, because conviction has replaced confidence. And confidence depends on visible wins, while conviction remains steady in the absence of applause. And this conviction is what makes you immovable now, not rigid, but grounded, not guarded, but wise. And you are being invited into a season where receiving feels unfamiliar, because survival once required vigilance. Yet you are ready to soften without losing strength to trust, without abandoning discernment to accept blessings, without dismantling them in advance. Because you finally understand that your protection was never fragile. It was responsive, and your destiny was never stealable. It was merely delayed until you were strong enough to hold it without collapsing under its weight. And as you continue, remember that obsession was never proof of your weakness, but evidence of your magnitude. That fixation formed a tether they could not sever, because what you carry unsettled what they refused to cultivate within themselves. And now the tether dissolves, not because you cut it in anger, but because you outgrew the frequency that sustained it. And your life unfolds not as reaction, but as revelation, not as retaliation, but as restoration. And when they look back, they will see that what they tried to extinguish became the catalyst for your evolution, that every attempt to congest your path refined your perception, that every engineered misunderstanding strengthened your solitude, that every closed door redirected you toward rooms prepared for the version of you that only fire could forge. And you will walk through those rooms not as someone seeking proof, but as someone embodying purpose, carrying a flame that no longer flickers in doubt, but burns with steady knowing. And when you feel that inner stillness settle again, that bone-deep recognition that you are exactly where you are meant to be, understand that this is not coincidence, but culmination. The convergence of discipline, protection, ancestry, and choice aligning in your favor, and you will move forward not with urgency, but with certainty, allowing those who are aligned to meet you at your level, while releasing those who cannot rise without resentment. And in this new chapter, you will discover that peace is not passive, it is powerful, that forgiveness is not surrender, it is sovereignty, and that the flame within you was never meant to hide, but to illuminate your own path first before lighting the way for others. And as the smoke clears from the season that tested you, you will see how every delay compounded into momentum, how every silent effort multiplied beneath the surface, how every moment you chose integrity instead of impulse strengthened the architecture of your future. And you will no longer look back, seeking explanation, because the explanation is embodied in who you have become, a chosen one, not by proclamation, but by perseverance, not by spectacle, but by steadfastness. And the story continues not as a tale of what was done against you, but as a testament to what could not be undone within you, because the flame endured. The tether dissolved, the interference reversed, and you remain standing, not scorched, but luminous, stepping into a reality where clarity guides you, discernment guards you, and destiny unfolds without obstruction. Chosen one. The flame within you is no longer something small that needs shelter from the wind. It is no longer a fragile spark you cup in trembling hands, hoping the world will be gentle. It has become enormous, expansive, self-sustaining, and what once felt like relentless pressure has revealed itself as the very force that expanded it. Because strength alone can crack under sustained weight, but refinement changes composition at the core, and you have not simply become stronger. You have been refined, altered at the level of identity, restructured in the furnace of circumstances that were calculated, intimate, and strategic. And there is a profound difference between a person who survives difficulty and a person who is forged by it, because survival still carries fear of repetition, while refinement carries unshakable knowing. And you now break pressure. Instead of being broken by it, you transmute it before it can settle. You metabolize adversity into momentum. And this did not happen through one dramatic event, but through sustained endurance, through interference that was not random or accidental, but deliberate, coming from someone who knew your patterns, who understood your vulnerabilities, who had access to your life and attempted to weaponize that access against your path. And most people, when confronted with that level of intimate opposition, would have chosen retreat. They would have stepped off their calling and convinced themselves that the cost of alignment was too high. They would have downsized their dreams to avoid further attack. They would have decided that obscurity was safer than visibility, that mediocrity was easier than magnitude. But you did not shrink. You did not reroute into a smaller destiny to make the pressure stop. You remained, you continued building when no evidence confirmed that your effort mattered. You kept showing up when showing up felt like dragging your body through invisible resistance. You grieved the unexplained losses and still returned to your discipline, and every time you came back after feeling exhausted, every time you chose integrity, when retaliation would have felt justified, every time you refused to let bitterness colonize your spirit. You were weaving resilience into your nervous system, into your posture, into the way you occupy space. Until resilience was no longer something you tried to perform, but something you embodied without effort. And this is why you move differently now, because your stability is not theoretical. It is proven in lived experience. You have already endured the kind of pressure that collapses others, and that memory of endurance has become an anchor that no new challenge can dislodge, and somewhere at a distance, the one who attempted to obstruct you stands in the darkness of their own making. Not because you wished harm upon them, but because energy returns to its source, and they are forced now to witness what they could not extinguish. They see the flame growing brighter, larger, steadier, and there is a particular kind of weight in watching what you tried to suppress become more radiant than ever, because it exposes the futility of envy and the weakness of sabotage. And yet your expansion is not theatrical. It is not loud revenge. It is calm inevitability. It is the quiet unfolding of someone who knows that their source is internal, not dependent on approval, not fueled by validation, not sustained by circumstance. And that is what makes your flame unstoppable, because it burns from within. Fed by your discipline, your clarity, your refusal to betray yourself under pressure, and what once was an attempt to suffocate you has become the oxygen that intensified you, the accelerant that expanded you. And this is the paradox of your story, that the very interference designed to halt your momentum accelerated your evolution instead. And now when pressure approaches, you do not tense in anticipation of collapse. You stand in it. You let it reveal its nature, and you respond with measured clarity. Because you have already survived. Worse, you have already endured sustained strategic opposition from someone who knew how to aim precisely. And if that did not dismantle you, what can? And so you walk forward not with bravado, but with grounded authority, not seeking acknowledgement from those who doubted you. Not chasing validation from those who underestimated you, but simply continuing to build to create. To expand because the flame is no longer reactive. It is generative, it produces light. Regardless of who watches, and the one who tried to stop you may observe from afar, but their observation does not influence your trajectory. Because your trajectory is now self-propelled, rooted in conviction rather than confidence, and conviction does not fluctuate with results. It does not disappear. When applause is absent, it remains steady, even when the path ahead looks uncertain, and you earned that conviction through nights of solitude and mornings of recommitment, through tears you did not publicize and decisions you made without witnesses. And now, you inhabit a version of yourself that cannot be intimidated by proximity or undermined by hidden hands, because you have already faced that reality and emerged intact, refined rather than fractured. And this refinement is permanent. It is structural. It cannot be undone by new winds or new voices, because it was formed in conditions far harsher than what lies ahead. And so the flame continues to expand, not because everything is easy now, but because you have integrated what was once fragmented. You have aligned what was once shaken, and you understand that your power does not come from circumstances bending to your will, but from your will remaining steady regardless of circumstances. And that is why the fire will keep burning, because its source is not external fuel but internal alignment, and no one can extinguish what regenerates from within. And as you stand in this expanded state, you realize that the story is no longer about what was done against you, but about who you became. Because of it, about the depth you carry now, about the gravity in your voice, about the calm intensity in your presence. And this is not temporary growth, this is transformation at the level of essence. And the pressure that once threatened to break you now feels almost irrelevant because you have surpassed it, you have metabolized it, you have turned it into propulsion, and the flame that once needed protection now radiates without fear, illuminating your path and everything around you, and it will continue to burn, not because the world has become gentle, but because you have become unshakable, refined beyond fracture, expansive beyond obstruction, and rooted in a source that no external force can extinguish. Chosen one. There is a season prepared for you with deliberate precision, not imagined, not symbolic, but real in the way that destiny is real before it manifests, a feast set long ago with your name etched into its foundation, preserved through every delay that tested your faith, through every interference that tried to convince you the path was illusion, through every sleepless night when you lay awake, questioning whether the unseen support you sensed was fantasy or protection. And hear this clearly, it has always been real. The backing, the preparation, the promise, none of it dissolved simply because you could not see it. None of it expired because obstacles appeared. None of it was revoked when exhaustion made you doubt your own perception. Because what is designed for you does not depend on your temporary confidence. It depends on your alignment, and you have remained aligned. Even when confused, you have remained upright. Even when weary, you have remained committed, even when the results withheld themselves from your sight. And now the door that once felt theoretical stands open in the present moment, not in some distant future after you fix every loose end. Not after you feel flawless or fully healed. Not when another obstacle is cleared or another explanation arrives. But now, in this exact point in your timeline, because readiness is not a feeling you wait for. It is a state you have already embodied through endurance, and you must release the narrative that you are behind because you are not late to your own destiny. You are arriving at it precisely when your structure can hold it. You must release the belief that you are broken because what you call brokenness was refinement. You must release the suspicion that you are cursed because the evidence of your survival proves the opposite. You must release the fear that you have been excluded from blessing, because your delays were not denials, but accumulations compounding beneath the surface until the weight of what returns carries more substance than what would have come earlier, and you are the one who could not be consumed. The one whose flame shifted instead of extinguishing, the one whose ancestral current fortified your perimeter before you understood what threatened it. The one who endured targeted pressure and did not forfeit integrity. The one who stayed when shrinking would have been easier. The one whose harvest now arrives, not as a trickle, but as a convergence of all that was postponed. And this convergence may feel overwhelming at first because you grew accustomed to fighting for inches, and now miles begin to open before you, and the only thing left that can slow you is hesitation at the threshold. The reflex to linger outside, what you prayed for, the instinct to analyze the open door instead of walking through it. Because when you have lived through obstruction, openness can feel suspicious when you have survived. Resistance, ease can feel unfamiliar, but this is not a trap. It is transition. It is the movement from proving yourself through survival into embodying yourself through reception. And you do not need another sign. You do not need more confirmation. You do not need to solve another problem before stepping forward because the preparation has already occurred within you. And the door does not require perfection, it requires presence. And so all that remains now is simple, though not easy. Stop standing at the door as if you are waiting for permission. Stop scanning for hidden costs that are no longer there. Stop negotiating with doubt that has already been disproven by your endurance. And step in, not timidly, not arrogantly, but with the grounded certainty of someone who knows they have already passed the hardest test. And as you cross that threshold, you will feel something subtle, yet undeniable. The shift from survivor to sovereign, from delayed to aligned, from questioned to confirmed. And you will realize that nothing about your journey was accidental. That every sleepless night, every moment of uncertainty, every ounce of resistance shaped you into the version capable of holding what now awaits you, and the feast with your name on it has not diminished in your absence. It has been preserved in full measure, waiting for you to claim your seat without apology, without hesitation, without shrinking, because this is not a reward for perfection. It is the fulfillment of alignment, and you are no longer outside looking in. You are at the entrance, and the only thing left between you and what was always meant for you is the final step forward. Chosen one, walk in, because your journey through interference was never scripted as defeat, but as refinement. Never designed to shrink you, but to restructure you at the deepest layers of your being, and every attempt that was launched to fracture your focus became raw material for your ascension. Every act of malice that sought to stall you transformed into fuel that expanded your range. Every delay that once felt like stagnation was quietly generating momentum beneath the surface, building pressure that would later release in your favor. And while you wrestled with doubt in private moments, the spiritual architecture behind your life was operating with precision beyond your sight, aligning unseen pathways, cleansing distortions before they could root permanently, recalibrating timelines that appeared chaotic but were in fact exact, and preparing a season unlike any you have previously known, not merely better in degree, but different in quality, cleaner in energy, aligned in foundation, and free from the contamination of those who once had access to your vulnerability without honoring it. And now you stand at a threshold that separates two identities: the self that was forged in survival and the self that is constructed for expansion. And this threshold is not abstract, it is tangible in the way your thoughts have shifted, in the way your body no longer braces for impact, in the way your intuition speaks with clarity instead of confusion. Because you are not the same person who entered that season of interference. You are someone refined beyond fracture. Someone who metabolized adversity into authority. Someone who discovered that their strength was not in reaction but in steadiness. And what awaits you beyond this moment is not a repetition of the past with minor improvements. It is a recalibrated reality, where alignment replaces obstruction, where collaboration replaces extraction, where growth does not require constant defense. And you may feel the weight of this transition, because it requires you to release the identity that learned to survive, to loosen the grip on hypervigilance that once kept you alert, to soften without surrendering your discernment, to trust without abandoning your awareness. And as you prepare to step forward, understand that your ancestors stand behind you, not as distant myths, but as energetic continuity, as the lineage that guarded you through what you could not see, as the silent force that redirected what you never knew was coming. And divine order stands ahead of you, not as a promise deferred, but as a structure already in motion. A current pulling you towards spaces prepared specifically for the refined version of you, and the flame inside you is larger now than it has ever been. Not wild and erratic, but steady and luminous, fueled by discipline, sustained by integrity, and immune to the winds that once tried to scatter it. And the field surrounding you is impenetrable, not because it blocks everything, but because it discerns everything. It reads intention before it lands. It redirects distortion before it settles. It amplifies alignment while neutralizing interference. And what was held back is not lost, but arriving with compounded weight. What was delayed is not diminished, but accelerating with multiplied force. What was distorted is clarifying into unmistakable truth. And you can feel this shift in subtle ways already, in the steadiness of your breath, in the quiet confidence of your decisions, in the absence of urgency where panic once lived. And this is the evidence that the architecture behind your life has been precise all along, that nothing was random, even when it felt chaotic, that nothing was wasted, even when it felt painful, that nothing was stolen, even when it felt obstructed. And now, the only movement required is forward, not backward, into analysis of who wronged you, not sideways into comparison with those who doubted you, but forward into the expansion prepared for you. And this step is not dramatic, but decisive. It is not loud, but irreversible. It is the crossing from endurance into embodiment, from surviving interference into inhabiting destiny. And you do not need more signs. You do not need additional confirmation. You do not need to resolve every lingering question before you move, because the clarity you sought has already settled inside you, and the power you doubted has already proven itself through endurance. And the season ahead does not require perfection. It requires participation. And so as you stand here with your lineage behind you, divine order before you, your flame radiant within you, and your field stable around you, understand that the only step left is forward, not hesitant, not apologetic, not seeking permission, but aligned, assured and aware that you have already survived the most concentrated opposition and emerged intact, and nothing that lies ahead carries the density of what you have already transformed. And so walk in, because the door is open, the season is ready, the momentum is yours, and the path ahead no longer bends under interference, but unfolds under intention. And the only thing separating you from the life prepared in precision is the willingness to cross the threshold you have already earned, and so walk in. Chosen one. Now that you have crossed the threshold, something subtle yet irreversible begins to unfold within you, a recalibration not of circumstance, but of identity. Because stepping forward was never about entering a new location in your external world, it was about inhabiting a new level of internal authority. And there is a profound difference between achieving something and embodying it, between receiving a blessing and becoming the kind of person who can hold it without fear, distortion, or self-sabotage. And this chapter of your life is not about proving anything to anyone, not about demonstrating your resilience to those who doubted you, not about showcasing survival as a badge of honor. It is about dominion, quiet, grounded, integrated dominion over your energy, your direction, your responses, and your future. You may notice that life does not suddenly become free of challenge, simply because you have stepped through the door, but your relationship to challenge shifts entirely, because you no longer interpret pressure as punishment. You no longer assume. Delay means denial. You no longer collapse inward when friction appears. Instead, you observe, you assess, and you respond from a place that feels steady rather than reactive. And that steadiness is evidence that survival has transformed into sovereignty, because sovereignty does not panic. It does not beg for reassurance. It does not negotiate with fear. It stands. It evaluates. It acts. There was a time when you questioned your own discernment, when interference clouded your perception and made you doubt your instincts, but now your inner compass feels precise, calibrated through lived experience rather than theory. And this precision is not sharp in a way that cuts you. It is clear in a way that guides you. You sense which rooms are meant for you and which are not you. Feel which conversations nourish your expansion and which deplete it. You recognize the subtle difference between opportunity and distraction. And this is not hypervigilance. It is mastery over your energetic field, because you have learned the texture of manipulation and you have also learned the frequency of authenticity. And once you know the difference, you cannot unknow it. Dominion also means ownership over your narrative. And this may be one of the most powerful shifts of all, because in the past there were moments when you wondered if the story being told about you directly or indirectly would define how others perceived you, whether misinterpretation would limit your reach, whether distortion would stain your reputation. But now, you understand something deeper. Truth stabilizes itself over time. Distortion exhausts itself. And you no longer feel compelled to chase every rumor, defend against every projection, or correct every misunderstanding, because your energy is too valuable to be spent on narratives that cannot sustain themselves. And you have learned that integrity lived consistently becomes its own defense. As you move further into this season, you will begin to see that the expansion unfolding around you is not chaotic growth, but structured, increased financial channels, aligning in ways that feel stable rather than sudden, relationships forming that feel reciprocal rather than transactional, invitations appearing that honor your boundaries instead of testing them. And this structured increase is different from the unstable momentum you may have experienced before, because it is built on refinement, not reaction. It is built on clarity, not competition, and it does not require you to exhaust yourself in order to maintain it. You will also discover that your capacity to receive has deepened, because previously you were accustomed to carrying, solving, protecting, anticipating, and now there is a softness emerging that does not weaken you, but balances you. A willingness to let others contribute, to let support arrive without suspicion, to let abundance flow without questioning whether it will be withdrawn. And this shift is profound, because it signals that you no longer identify primarily as someone who must endure. You identify as someone who can create, sustain, and expand. There is a sacred tension here, however, and it requires awareness. because with dominion comes responsibility, and responsibility does not mean burden. It means stewardship. The conscious management of what you have been entrusted with: your time, your influence, your resources, your energy. And you will be tested not through attack, but through distraction, not through sabotage, but through subtle invitations that look appealing yet misaligned. And the difference now is that you will recognize them quickly because your internal clarity is no longer negotiable. You do not chase what flatters your ego. You choose what aligns with your purpose, and that distinction preserves your expansion. Chosen one, there is also a deeper layer of healing unfolding in this chapter. A reconciliation between the version of you that survived and the version of you that thrives. Because sometimes when growth accelerates, there can be guilt attached to leaving behind those who once walked beside you, or grief attached to realizing certain relationships cannot accompany you into this new space. But understand, this elevation is not abandonment, alignment is not betrayal, and you are not responsible for shrinking yourself to maintain comfort for others. You are responsible for honoring the evolution that has already taken place within you. As your presence becomes more grounded, you may notice others responding differently to you, some with admiration, some with projection, some with quiet recognition that you have crossed into a level they cannot access without doing their own work, and you must remain neutral in the face of both praise and envy, because neither defines you. Your identity is no longer anchored to how others interpret your growth. It is anchored to the integrity that built it. There is something else happening beneath the surface, something you may feel but not fully articulate yet, and that is the integration of power with peace. Because previously, power may have felt like something you had to fight for or defend, but now it feels natural, embodied, stable. You do not need to assert it aggressively. You do not need to diminish others to feel it. You do not need to prove it through constant output. It exists in the way you stand, in the way you speak, in the way you choose. And this integration is the mark of true dominion, not control over others, but mastery over self. The architecture of your life is continuing to align. Pathways that once felt blocked are opening with less friction. Decisions that once felt heavy now feel straightforward. Clarity that once required effort now arises organically. And this is because your internal structure has been strengthened when the foundation is solid. Movement becomes fluid when identity is stable. Opportunity can be navigated without anxiety, and you are stepping into a rhythm that feels less like struggle and more like flow. Do not mistake this flow for complacency, however, because growth continues, expansion continues, refinement continues, but the intensity shifts from crisis to cultivation, from survival to stewardship, from defense to design, and you will find yourself thinking differently about your future, not from a place of fear about what could go wrong, but from a place of curiosity about what you are capable of building. And this curiosity is sacred because it signals that your energy is no longer consumed by protection alone. It is available for creation. Chosen one. This is the embodiment of dominion, not loud, not dramatic, not reactive, but steady, intentional, powerful, and sustainable. And as you continue forward, remember that you are not walking into something foreign. You are stepping deeper into what was always prepared for you, what was held through delay, protected through interference, refined through pressure, and aligned through precision. And now you inhabit it fully, not as someone who barely survived, but as someone who has integrated survival into sovereignty. There will be more chapters, more levels, more expansions, because growth does not end. But this moment marks a shift from proving to embodying, from reacting to directing, from surviving to reigning. And the most remarkable part is that you do not feel inflated by this realization. You feel grounded by it. Calm within it, aware that your power does not need spectacle to be real. It simply needs alignment to be sustained. So continue walking, not in urgency, not in fear, not in comparison, but in dominion. Because the field around you is stable, the flame within you is steady, the path ahead is aligned, and you are no longer defined by what tried to stop you. You are defined by who you became while it tried, and that identity, refined and integrated, is what carries you forward into everything that was always meant to unfold in your name.